So I wanted to show you some things, some ideas, tips, tricks, etc. Um, that I find useful as a painter. Maybe it's because I'm a new painter, or maybe some other people will find this stuff helpful. But there's just some things in here that I guess I didn't see in a lot of videos. Things that I find helpful, ideas to take a look at, that kind of thing. So first thing I want to talk about are these painter's diaries. So these, you can get them at Amazon. I get them from Jerry's when I go there because I happen to have one close. I find these things super useful for a lot of reasons. So you can get it in this 9x12 size. You can also get this travel size, which is the 6x8. I find both of them useful. I probably use the smaller one a little bit more. But they're all set up the same way. So they all have these cotton sheets in them that you can do your swatches on. So typically I will wet this larger section down, put it in on the smaller side, pretty much straight from the pan, the tube, whatever, and then let it travel and see how it dilutes down. So these all have these cotton pages and these glassine sheets. That helps keep them separate. I find the glassine sheets to be a little bit in the way sometimes, but they do, keep the pages from sticking together and stuff. But when I lay this stuff down, I did start getting in the habit. Let me find a page I did it on. Oh, maybe back here. So I did start getting in the habit of putting a little dot on them when I did them, because it helped me determine how far some of these would travel in the water. And I just found that helpful. I really like these. My big one I have separated into brands. I don't know how useful that is. In the beginning it was, now perhaps not so much. Once you get a lot of paints in, then it becomes, I don't know, it's easier to do it the other way, and I'll show you that in a minute. But you can see here the dots that I put in. But it is nice to be able to see them and have them laid out and that kind of thing. Like I said, I actually like these a lot. But it's the smaller ones that I actually use a lot of. I actually have two of them. We'll look at this one first. So in this one, I actually took the glassine sheets out. So in the smaller one, I actually break this down by color. So I try to keep like all my reds together, my oranges, my yellows, etc. And I do that so that when I think, hey, I really need a red for this, I can actually just open this and have a look at all my reds, and I'm seeing them not necessarily side by side, but at least together. And that way I can look at them and kind of compare them in my head and be like, oh, this one's a little too pink, or this is a little too blue, or something like that. And it helps me narrow down the reds. Also because I do tend to be a bit red-green colorblind. So seeing them side by side helps that for me. These are also really portable. So anytime I go to buy paint, I always try to remember to bring it. So that way I know exactly what I have, and I know I'm not the only one who's done this. I have, on more than one occasion, bought the same paint on accident, forgetting that I had it. So I find these super useful. In both sizes, the pages come out. So if you get them in there, you need to rearrange, you can. Some people have said that the pages don't stay in as well if you take them in and out. I've not had that issue. I don't take them out a lot. I don't need to. But I just, like I said, for me, it's super handy. It's easy to travel with. You can toss it in a bag if you're going to go, paint out in the world kind of thing. So I also use these a lot of times, to make notes on. So if I know, hey, I really want a color from Daniel Smith, I can put a note in here, and that way when I go back to Jerry's, I can look and see if they have it, kind of thing. So like I said, I did take the glassine out of this. After a while, those pages, I guess the holes in them get really rough, and then I just feel like they don't they don't move as smooth. I did take the extra pages out of this and put it in the other one after I got it. As you can see, I did not take the glassine out of this yet. But I started another one in part because I wanted to get rid of some of those colors that I knew I wouldn't be buying again. You know, I had some Cotman colors that I just didn't particularly care for. Won't buy those again. And then the Mei Liang colors that I actually do like, you can only buy those as a set. You can't buy them individually. And I'm not going to buy a set for just a couple of colors. So I ended up taking those out and coming back and doing the colors that I knew I could potentially replace easily, and that I would actually be willing to replace. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the Cotman colors. I love Winsor Newton, just don't like the Cotman. But I just broke it down by color. And because I just kind of felt like the oranges and the yellows, there's not a lot of those, I guess, I feel like I need. So I did that. But I just find this very useful for me because I use a lot of, I guess, green, blue, purple, the cool colors, and the beachy type colors. I ended up actually breaking my greens, blues, and aquas down. I had a hard time sometimes picking, you know, is this more blue, is this more green? So it was nice to just be able to separate them. You know, this is my green page, and here's like my turquoise aqua page, and then my blue page. So that was kind of nice. I didn't have to, you know, worry about it, and I would put one down and be like, oh, maybe I should have done that on the green page kind of thing. So that was just a nice, you know, way for me and what I do to separate them. And then I actually added the extra sheets from the other one in the back. I will probably pull the glassine sheets out of here because I don't care for them. They just, for me, they do kind of get in the way. But I also, you can see, I try to always do the dots because I want to know how far this is going to travel. And lately I've started adding a little bit of salt on these to see how the salt reaction is going to be. Now, I do a salt reaction on my swatch cards, so I'm not too fussed about that here. But this does give me a quick glance on if something's going to be reactive. So I really love these. They're not super expensive. I believe the big one will run you $15, $20 on Amazon. I know Jerry's has them on sale quite frequently, and I think I got this one for 10 or 12. And the little ones are usually, I think, like 10 or so on Amazon. I think I got mine for $5 when they were on sale at Jerry's. So definitely worth the money as far as I'm concerned. Like I said, I do love these painter's diaries and just find them super useful for me. The next thing I'm going to talk about is going to be very controversial. So dot cards. I love me a good dot card, y'all. I find them super useful. I love to be able to swatch them out and have a good look and see exactly how those paints are going to play. You know, a lot of times you see the color online, or even, you know, in the store, may have some swatches or something, but it doesn't always give you a very clear color. So I feel like the dot cards give you that opportunity, and it will help you narrow down things. Like, there are definitely some colors that I would not have bought had I realized kind of how they were going to look. And there's also some colors that I would have completely passed on and think that I didn't like them. And in the end, they're some of my favorites. So you guys saw this in the Beam Paint test that I did a while back. They sent me this little dot card. I ended up, once I bought these colors, I popped off the little dots and stuck them in the paint stones. But, you know, if it weren't for this dot card, I probably wouldn't have bought these as quickly as I did, for sure. And, you know, I ended up liking all of them, so I actually ended up buying all of them. And then Winsor Newton, they don't have quite as many as Daniel Smith, but you can see that their dot cards are set up so that they have their little dot, and they actually give you an area to swatch on so that you can see it. And it just helps for me. Like, I can mark which ones I already have, which ones I maybe want, and which ones that, hey, let's see if they have them. Is there a color, a corresponding color in another brand, that kind of thing. So for me, it just really helps that. I really like dot cards, and I know that sometimes they can get expensive. The Daniel Smith ones, for instance, I want to say it's like $50 to dot all of the colors, but it's also like 266 colors. So for me, it ends up being a good deal. It does save me some money down the road. So the Daniel Smith dot cards came a little differently than the Winsor Newton. Still set up like this. Excuse me. And still are definitely doable, and most of these have enough paint on them that you could actually do something small with them without any issues. So I ended up, because they didn't have, you know, their swatching section, I just sort of made my own grid here and did that. And then, like I said, I keep track of what I have that way. I also use this a lot of times to be like, ooh, hey, I really like this color, let's mark it, let's keep track, and that way I know which ones I really want. So it just, I guess, I love dot cards. I love the fact that they really show you the color, that they're going to help you really decide. You're going to be able to see granulation and tone and saturation and all that fun stuff. So I really like dot cards. I find them very useful. Like I said, there's so many things I would have skipped, if I had the dot cards first. Opera Pink, I'm looking at you. So I think they're worth the money. I know a lot of people don't. They feel that it's a waste of money and they could have just bought paints. Maybe in part because I only get the bigger paints, the 15 mils. The smaller ones aren't really handy here, so maybe that's part of why I'm more apt to just buy the dot card than a small tube. But I love dot cards. I find them incredibly useful. I just, like I said, there's a lot of colors that I would have skipped, and a lot of colors that I wish I hadn't bought because I didn't know what they were going to look like. So, big fan of dot cards. By all means, please use them. On my porcelain palettes, I like to be able to mark my stuff. So obviously this is just the blue painter's tape, and then I use regular artist tape to write on them. I do have some palettes that have an edge that I can write directly onto. So I don't know if everybody knows this, but I didn't know this until I laid tile in a kitchen and then found it out. You can actually just use a Sharpie on these and you can write your color. So if you are like me and you may divide your stuff up, and you want to know what color you have, because if you're like me, I will never remember it, then it's easy enough. You can actually do that, and then when it's gone, this actually will wipe off. Even though it's Sharpie, it will stay there for pretty much as long as your paint is there, but it does help me keep track of which colors I have and where they are. And sometimes even if I've mixed up something and I can't remember what it was, then it just helps me keep track. These are palettes that I tend to keep colors that I use more often in. I don't like my stuff to mix a lot, so I divided mine. I ended up just using some shower sealer, and that's how I ended up separating mine. It works pretty good overall. I will talk a little bit about that at a later date, but that's how I tend to do my palettes. And like I said, this is how I keep track of what is in them. If you're lucky enough that you have a palette that has a lip on it and you can write it, like I said, you can write it directly with that Sharpie and be able to see it and then clean it off when you need to. So something else I want to talk about is storage options. Don't dismiss things like Dollar Tree or Five Below, those kinds of things, because a lot of times they will have solutions that you may not have thought of. Let me pull one down here. So, try not to drop nothing. When I first got started, I was actually storing my stuff in these containers. These came from Five Below. You can see this one even still has a label on it. So, I was putting my paints in there, and then I ended up, it got out of control, and now I have too many paints for something like that. But there are so many things that you can find at Dollar Tree or Five Below. And, you know, these things are stackable. They're just handy. Initially, I was doing some of my paintbrush storage in one of the Dollar Tree pen holders. Oh, let me grab it. Oh, here we are. Okay. So I used this for a while. Because of my ADHD, I don't like my brushes to just be all dumped together. So I used this for a little while, and then I ended up, I have too many brushes, so I had to move to something else. But a lot of these things, these storage options, like these little plastic bins, these are really inexpensive. I think this is definitely Dollar Tree. This may be Five Below. But, you know, they don't cost that much. And so if you need to change them out or something happens, they're inexpensive. It's easy to do. They're just, like I said, there's a lot of options that I wouldn't have thought of. And they have come in super, super handy. And I am very glad that I have used them. So by all means, I recommend that you check out some of your local stores like that, your little discount stores, for some of these items, because they just come in really, really handy. So let's see what else. Oh, so I know we all keep some paper towels handy. You know, for me, having to go through a lot of paper towels kind of bothers me. So I ended up just buying some white wash rags. Some of them came from Dollar Tree, some of them came from IKEA, and I ended up buying white because I could just bleach them down. As you can see, they're definitely well used. But I use these instead of paper towels most of the time, and I just like it better in general. And then when they get too wet, I hang them up over something, let them dry out, and go back to it. So, you know, don't dismiss using, you know, the wash rags or something as opposed to paper towels for everything. So, as far as mixing goes, if you're lucky enough that you have a palette that has mixing areas, that is awesome. If you do not, that can present an issue. So there are some options. Depending on what you like. So for me personally, I do not like all my mixes to run together. I don't like the muddy colors. It just bothers me. That's why you saw I had a palette that I had separated sections out of. But I also have some of these. These are condiment plates, bowls, I don't know what to call them. So condiment containers. These happen to come from World Market. These came from Amazon. They're all stackable, so they don't take up a lot of space. But I like them. If you are like me and you want to mix, and then you want to, like, you know, you've mixed and you need to do your, you know, kind of clean your brush out a little bit, these corners are very useful for that. It helps, which is awesome. And you can also get something a little bigger. I also have these. These are appetizer plates, and these actually came from Home Goods or Home Sense, one of those stores. I got 4 of them for like $6, so next to nothing. There's a pretty good size space for you to do your mixing on. These are also useful if you are doing different paintings and you want to keep your colors, you know which colors are which. You can write which painting you're working on, have all your colors on one spot, and be able to set it aside and not worry about contaminating them or anything else. So I find these little plates to be very useful. Like I said, I do like the condiment options too. For me, they're very, very useful. If you are using a plastic palette and you don't like to mix on that, then this is a good option, because the plastic palettes, as we all know, are significantly cheaper, but these are pretty inexpensive. You still have a porcelain area to mix on, and you kind of get the best of both worlds at that point. All right, so brush storage. I talked about that just a little bit. So I do not like to have all of my brushes together. I did start out using mugs, containers, you know, the pen trays, and then after a while they all kind of fall together, and I find it hard for me personally to see that. So I ended up I think I was at the doctor's office, and something clicked in my head for how they had their pens. But these are just acrylic tumblers, again from like Home Goods, I think, and I added a little bit of sand. If you don't like the sand, you could use beans, you could use lentils. There's a lot of things that you could put in there, beads, whatever, to hold your brushes. And then they just sit in there, they sit up, they're separated so you can still see them, and that makes it easier for people like me, who have trouble finding it if they're all bunched together. I'm also a very out of sight, out of mind, so I will forget I have a brush if I can't see it easily. So that's how I do my brush storage. You know, I think there's a lot of emphasis put on, you know, brush racks and that kind of thing, when there's other options and they're just as valid and they're super inexpensive. I actually saw a crochet hook wood rack, I think at Michael's the other day, that would be excellent for brush storage as well. So just know that you don't have to have something labeled for painting or for brushes or whatever to make it work. Sometimes I think we get caught up in that, get fixated on that, and sometimes there's just a lot easier solutions. For instance, this is actually an old candle container that I just cleaned up. I don't have brushes in it. I could put brushes in it, but I ended up using it for some gel pens. Things like that can make it easier and a little less expensive, because painting is not necessarily cheap. So just some thoughts on that. I also like to keep toothpicks handy. I use these for a lot of things. Sometimes you got to mix in the tube. Sometimes you need to mix in the tray. You know, whatever. Toothpicks are cheap and valuable on something like that. So I also use toothpicks in conjunction with these plastic pipettes. If I need to move a color from a well, I will wet it down, mix it up with my toothpick until it gets pretty soupy, and then pull it up with one of these pipettes and move it to wherever I need it. Yeah, you get a little bit left behind, but that's been very helpful, very useful, and a very easy way to move some of these for me personally that I like. I think I've talked before about I like to wet my paints with the pipettes too. I don't particularly like to spray them, so I keep very specifically just a jar of clean water. Nothing gets rinsed in it. It always has a plastic pipette in it, and that's all I use this for, is that's how I wet my paints. I put a couple drops on there, or however I feel like I'm gonna need. That activates them. It keeps the cross-contamination down, and I don't end up with colors that bleed into one another. So I use those two things a lot. Let's see, what else? You're also going to need clips of various kinds. So again, these don't have to be expensive. They can come from a lot of places that you might not expect. For instance, these and that one, I'm pretty sure, are from Dollar Tree. I also have some of these from Dollar Tree. This actually came from the art store. It's a lot bigger, and these actually came from Harbor Freight. So, you know, it's useful to have some different sizes and some different options. Something I do want to mention as well. So if you have one of these clips that is magnetic, if you need a place while you're out in the world doing your art, you can use one of these, and if you use it backwards, let me get it on here like this, and then you have a tin here for your supplies, you can actually put that on there, and now it's holding your tin. So that can be helpful. I think most of us are using the paint tins out and about, so just something to keep in mind. And like I said, clips, they don't have to be expensive. These have worked really well for me. I think these are like 89 cents at the art store, and they're nice size. These come in big packs for next to nothing. So even if they break later on, you're not out a whole lot of money. So that's always good. And the last thing I want to talk about is your water storage. So a lot of people do this very differently. Some people will have rinse water for their cool colors and rinse water for their warm colors. I think most of us try to keep a jar of clean water. I tend to keep 3 different jars. I like using jars because most of them come with lids. You can put lids on them if you want to. You can, keep them sealed if you've got pets or kids or something that might get into them. Do bear in mind that some of our paints are considered toxic, depending on what the ingredients are. So you do want to keep, your cats from drinking out of them, those kinds of things. So I just use jars. I think this is an old spaghetti sauce jar. I think. So there's a lid around somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is off the top of my head. These are just mason jars. These are particularly wide mouth jars, which are, if I can something, I prefer. It's just easier to get your stuff into. I keep 3. So I keep a full-on rinse jar, which is usually my big jar. I keep a smaller jar that I use only to pick up clean water in my brush. And then I have that 3rd jar with my pipette that I only use to wet my stuff. So that's how I do my water setup. Like I said, everybody's a little different. I also would like to mention, if you're using jars or something that may not have a lid, you can buy a pack of these little silicone lids, and they can go over the top of a lot of things. They actually have a fair bit of stretch to them, so they do fit a lot of stuff, and it will help keep stuff sealed up and keep it from, if you knock it over, it's not going to immediately spill everywhere. So like I said, you can buy these silicone lids on Amazon for cheap. You'll get a giant pack of them in a bunch of different colors. So I hope some of those tips were helpful for you. Maybe gave you some ideas or told you something you didn't necessarily know. If it was helpful, by all means, let me know. Tell me if there's anything else that you guys want to hear about, or, if I have tried something or what I do for any scenario kind of thing, and I will maybe do a video about it. But anyway, have a good day. Go out there and paint and enjoy yourself.